through 1974, after all of the money was spent, our environmental policies from larger agencies than local control have destroyed the economy here. It needs to end. It has to stop. And you talk about partnership, what we want is our economy back. And we need to do that to partner with you. We need money, but we don't want a handout. We want that policies set up so that the economy self-generates the revenue base so that local control can take care of our own economy. Your policies have failed. We would like to disassociate ourselves from you. Thank you very much. And we would like to part company. Thank you very much.
I wish the commissioner were here.
I'd like to ask the map in Pennsylvania, do you allow livestock and logging on your forest, or do you play environmentalists?
It's a great question. We don't have, okay, the question is, do we, in our national forest, which is the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, do we allow livestock grazing? We don't have a need for it, so it's not something that we do, although it is multiple use. Our use of that forest, actually, it's multiple use, is oil and gas production. And we're blessed because my predecessors, 100 and some years ago, when they set up the Allegheny National Forest, were smart enough to figure out that there are certain things you need to leave in the hands of the local community. And they did that with the subsurface rights. 93% of the subsurface rights for oil and gas are owned by individuals or entities, not the federal government. And so today it works and so today it's a beautiful national forest. It is. It's a little different than here. Obviously, it's hardwoods, but it's also an oil and gas field. I mean, it's not uncommon to be going down a trail and there's a pump jack. It's kicking off. You know. Yeah. Now I tell you, it's been a challenge sometimes because there are forces at play, the same environmental forces that this gentleman really just nailed in terms of identifying an issue that are trying to suppress that as well. And so our national forests were formed. Our national forests are not national parks. National forests are not managed by the Department of Interior because national forest trees are a crop. That's why they're managed by the Department of Agriculture. And as a crop, if the crop's not well managed, what happens?
Birds.
Yeah, one way or the other, it's going to leave the forest.
It sounds like you got a good deal going.
Yeah, well, it's a better thing when, and we have, you know, that's the difference, I guess. But it's just the same issues, and I get the frustration too. This is, we've been impacted that. We've had decades of misguided environmental activism in the name of, I guess, saving the forest. But the forest, if you can't put it into a museum, the trees won't live forever. And so if you don't actively manage it, and that's what we have today as a result of the environmental, I forget the exact word you use, but environmental policies, I guess, which are misguided over decades. You know, today we've got forests that are burning up. They're full of invasive species. And you know, and it's time to turn that around. It's an insult. Not alone is it an insult on you folks, and the personal harm that is created, the individual harm to families and individuals when those types of policies are allowed to continue. But it's also an insult to the American taxpayers. That's an asset, and if we don't harvest it, if we allow it to burn up, there's no return on investment. If we allow it to I like to brag a little bit about my hardwood cherry. We have some of the best in the world, but if you don't harvest it at the right time, and you wait too long or you don't get around, it loses value every year. There's a peak time for harvesting, and those are the types of things that your congressman and I have been aggressively working on in the House to be able to restore science and to healthy forests. And and the Forest Service has been a great partner to work with. But there's been you know, some of the bullseye that's put on their backs with lawsuits, and that's a big problem. It is, you know, it was tough to even proceed with a forest management plan, let alone every time you filed to, you know, put a permit through to do a timber sales, somebody was challenging in courts.
Are you gonna take more questions?
So we have a long ways to go on that, so.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So who's next? Did you want to clarify your point?
I do. I'd like to know why, now that it's time to harvest timber, especially in the Mapow area, that court injunctions have been filed by environmental groups to stop that harvesting. And we have a limited time to harvest that.
Yeah.
So why is that being allowed? Why do those groups not have to put up a bond to file those injunctions worth the value of that timber and the damage to the economy locally so that they can file it? Why do they get a free ride and we get the shaft?
That's a great point. In fact, we passed a bill in the House to do exactly that, so that the people that are filing these suits would have some skin in the game.
So did
They
it
couldn't.
pass?
It passed through the House. It's hung up in the Senate right now.
Well, certainly, there you go.
So, but it's not. It's still alive. It's not gone. We get into a lot of politics about that, but
It's a major concern.
it absolutely
That
is.
would stop this baloney.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. If they have something on the line as well, instead of just being able to file some paperwork. So you're
Why do they
absolutely.
get the free ride?
Yeah.
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 Congressman.
I hear you, don't see you. Oh, Mr. Weiss.
Always at the back. Number one, thank you for everything you and the chairman have done, and especially thank you for extending the invitation for one of our own to testify before your committee about the fire. I think one of the big questions and concerns has always been with fire borrowing, and the Forest Service gets strapped for cash because they have to use the money to manage the forest to put the fires out when they're burning. So that practice is something that, you know, we hope will end. But I think another question as it goes through is when you look at after fire aftermath, you have a 12-month NEPA process before the Forest Service can actually start, even sometimes longer, depending on the issue. How do we shorten that time frame so that the timber doesn't blue stain and we actually get some value out of it, but yet still be, you know, mindful of the process?
You know, I think Mike had some numbers. $700 million was transferred this last year. And I think that added up, as far as the fire borrowing is concerned, that was over 50% of the budget, right? At least that's a number.
No, it's not that high, but it's very significant.
I thought I heard the secretary use that percentage at one point of their budget that goes for fighting fires, but I could have my numbers off a little bit. But you're absolutely right. The fire borrowing issue is a tremendous problem. We've got this vicious cycle that we just can't get out of, and we need to. And, we're making efforts to do that as well, and that this sounds like a broken record, but that got stuck in the Senate as well.
I have a question on that subject.
Okay.
Something that I've been following CAL FIRE, and I know they're probably not perfect, but they do a damn good job of putting out the fires in California, and they work hard. Has anybody ever discussed separating the responsibility of putting out the fires from the DNR and have them manage the forest lands so they can focus on that, and creating a separate entity to fight the fires, and so they can focus on that, as in CAL FIRE, which is a really good example.
GT, is that something that's you run across at all?
No, not on a state level. I haven't seen that.
Mike, do you have any input on that?
I could
Okay.
make a comment. Earlier in my career, I worked about 20 years in Northern California, and really that was the infancy of CAL FIRE beginning to do the kind of work that you're talking about, taking over that responsibility as a state agency. Those kinds of discussions happen in different states in different ways. I don't know if it's happened in Washington or not. One of the, you know, that gets talked about in the Forest Service as well, is, you know, as we move and spend more of our budget that direction, people begin to think that we are becoming the fire agency instead of the resource management agency. As a resource manager, my concern would be that I would want to be able to use fire and use the firefighting forces, not just to suppress fire, but for prescribed burning and do all those kinds of things too in terms of being able to manage efficiently. That said, there are different ways to approach it. I'm sure California had a rationale for doing what they do, and they are renowned for their skill in firefighting, but they have had some very large fires down in California too. It's all over the West.
And John, the second part of your question had to do with the 12-month NEPA process. We actually, Congress has, and this was before I got there, I guess, so that I can't take credit for it, but there's something called a categorical exclusion that has allowed the Forest Service to approve timber harvest on some projects. That needs to be expanded. It absolutely does, so that, you know, those trees, like we were talking earlier, only have a value for so long. But it needs to, I found out today that the Forest Service has to go through the NEPA process when they want to reseed the forest after a fire, which just seems crazy to me. So we need to use those tools in other parts of forest management activity. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Marco Thompson, and I live up by Chifa. I was on my way to work one day, and I smelled smoke and closed the windows and put on the air conditioner. I was looking around for fire because I hadn't heard of anything. And on the way down the grade, just by the second grade on the way to Orville, there were 3 fires that had obviously been set on purpose. And so I called as soon as I could get to service. Never did hear any sirens, didn't hear any kind of response. I called 911 and reported it. Apparently they thought it had something to do with the plane that had crashed that morning and didn't ever fight it. So by the time